It's hard to believe Super Mario Odyssey is less than 2 months away. It may sound like a long time from now, but it's really not. I've been dying to play this game ever since the 5 seconds of footage were shown off in the Switch reveal trailer, and now that we know what the game's all about, it's pretty clear to say it's going to be the most ambitious and maybe even best Mario game of all time. With that being said, I thought it would be fun to do a retrospective of the 3D Mario series with one video a week towards Odyssey's release. We might not be able to play Odyssey until October, but in the meantime, we have plenty of 3D Mario games to play. It would only be logical to review the first 3D Mario game ever made first. Without further ado, time to take a look at Super Mario 64. Super Mario 64 is one of the most revolutionary games of all time. It cemented the fundamentals for the 3D platforming genre, leading many great games in the future, such as Banjo-Kazooie, to be developed. It's almost as revolutionary as the first Super Mario Bros. Was, and I say almost because it's pretty hard to top practically saving an entire industry. While Super Mario 64 was influential, does it still hold up to this day? Time to take those nostalgia goggles off, stick in the cartridge, and begin a grand adventure with Mario. I'll admit, a lot of 5th generation games don't hold up very well, but right off the bat I can certainly say Super Mario 64 still plays great. The controls are super responsive, and it just feels natural to control Mario. I'll admit I'm not the biggest fan of the N64 controller, but it didn't hinder my experience with Super Mario 64 at all. And honestly, the camera isn't as bad as everyone says it is. Sure, it's dated, but I haven't had any problems with it. The game also runs pretty smooth too, which is great. The game controls great, but how are the levels themselves? Most of them are excellent. Each level or world consists of 6 stars and 1 star for collecting 100 coins. What I love about Super Mario 64 is you don't have to collect each star in order. Want to collect a star behind the Chain Chomp before facing King Bob-omb? You can totally do that. Some of the stars are locked to certain missions like Racing Koopa the Quick, but it's mostly an open world experience. There's also multiple ways to collect some of the stars, which is a great thing. Players can explore which way suits them best to collect some of the stars, and the worlds themselves are mostly great. Bob-omb Battlefield, Whomp's Fortress, and Tiny Hooch Island being my favorites. However, there is one world later in the game that isn't that great. I won't spoil it for some who haven't beat the game, but let's just say it involves a magic carpet, and it isn't as fun to play as the other worlds. The most important part of the game is gameplay, and Super Mario 64 nails it even to this day. Presentation-wise, I'm gonna be a little more critical. A lot of the characters lack any texture, which is somewhat of a shame. Yet again, this is an early N64 game, so I'm gonna give it a pass. I don't expect it to look amazing, but for the time, it could have been a little bit better. How about the music? The music still holds up very well. The Dire Dire Docks theme is one of the best songs in the Mario series. Even Mario's sound effects still sound good. How about the post-game? Once you beat the final boss, you'll probably still have some stars to collect. It's just as fun to search for these stars as it was in the main game. The only stars I don't like collecting are the 100 coin stars, but that's a pretty minor flaw. There are just enough stars in the game to keep you busy. Overall, replaying Super Mario 64, I was surprised how well it's held up. The game still plays great, and that's saying something for an N64 game. Some of them don't hold up that well. The game still runs smoothly and it's a blast exploring the world. The only criticisms I have with the game are the 100 coin star missions and the weak presentation, but those are easy to look past when the game is this good. Overall, Super Mario 64 gets a 9.5 out of 10. It has some very minor flaws, but it's still a blast to play. Now it's time for a bonus round! It's time for some fun facts about Super Mario 64. Did you know that Super Mario 64 wasn't the first game where Charles Martinet voiced Mario? That was actually a PC game called Mario's Game Gallery.
Come here, fishy fishy!
Do you know that there was a sequel planned for Super Mario 64? It would have had Luigi and Mario in a co-op 3D game, similar to Super Mario 64, and it was going to be on the ill-fated N64 DD. It would have been cool to see, but unfortunately it didn't come far in development. But we're not done yet. It wouldn't be a 3D Mario retrospective without covering every 3D Mario game, would it? And Super Mario 64 DS sure the heck counts as a 3D Mario game. In fact, this was the first 3D Mario game I ever played. There's not a whole lot I can say about this game that I didn't say about Super Mario 64, but a lot of extra content was added, so without further ado, onto the review of Super Mario 64 DS. Super Mario 64 DS was a launch title for, you guessed it, the DS. My theory is that it was launched to prove the DS could run some pretty big games on it, and it sure did prove that. This game is pretty much the same as Super Mario 64, but there are quite a few new additions. The graphics have received a pretty good overhaul, and the characters look a lot better than they did on the N64. That's because there's texture. But what about some of the major differences? You can play as Mario, Yoshi, Wario, and finally, Luigi. Dare I say, L is Real 2004? These characters all have different abilities, and you're going to have to use all 4 of them to 100% the game. Mario's an average all-around character, Luigi is a high jumper, Yoshi can eat enemies, throw eggs, and flutter jump, and Wario has extreme strength. They also have exclusive power-ups. Only Mario can use a wing cap, while only Wario can use a metal cap. It's cool having a variety of playable characters, but I don't really like how it's handled. You can swap a hat to become a clone of a playable character, but if a mission has to be beat with Yoshi, you're gonna have to go back to Peach's castle and go through the door to play as Yoshi. There should have been a character select screen a la Super Mario Bros. 2. Or they could have had barrels in a way, kind of like Donkey Kong 64 did with playable characters. I also wish the characters were just an extension of one another, just like in Super Mario Bros. 2. Having certain moves and power-ups be restricted to each character is kind of a flaw. The characters feel more like keys to get a star, and some characters like Mario and Luigi are more useful than others, creating an imbalance where Wario and Yoshi are somewhat useless. It's a darn shame too, because Wario is one of my favorite Mario characters. It's a nice addition, but I wish the execution was better. The game also adds quite a few new stars to the game, bringing the original 120 to 140. These stars are mainly obtained by stepping on a switch to make a star appear for a short time, or playing the new mini-levels. These stars are still just as fun to get as the stars in the original game. And you can unlock mini-games by catching rabbits. These mini-games are mindless, but they're pretty fun. You go, Nintendo, teaching 11-year-old Dimitri how to gamble. Super Mario 64 DS also took advantage of DS download play. You take control of Yoshi's and try to get as many stars as you can, and the winner is the Yoshi with most stars. The selection of stages you can choose is kinda minimal, which stinks. However, the actual mode is pretty fun. It's kinda like Mario Kart's Balloon Battle, but in a 3D platformer. What's interesting about this battle mode is characters can use the wing cap besides Mario. Man, what a shame this wasn't added to the main game. It's a fun mode, and it would be neat to see a multiplayer mode like this in Super Mario Odyssey. Please have multiple player characters, Odyssey. Please have multiple playable characters. Luigi is counting on you, Nintendo. But the biggest question is, are the controls a lot worse because of the D-pad? This is an unpopular opinion, but I don't think the game is hindered too much by the D-pad. Sure, it would have been a lot better if it had an analog stick, but Nintendo handled the D-pad controls pretty well. It's nowhere near perfect, but the game is perfectly playable. And if you have a 3DS, you can use the circle pad instead, which makes the game a little better to play. You're still only going to get 8 directions of movement though, instead of full 3D movement. But do I think Super Mario 64 DS is better than Super Mario 64? It's a bit conflicting to me. I like the extra content, such as the 3 new playable characters, but I feel the execution wasn't that great. A future 3D Mario game handled the multiple playable characters much better. And there are quite a few new stars to collect. But I have to say, I enjoyed playing Super Mario 64 more than 64 DS. It felt a lot smoother and the controls were more precise. But you know what? Super Mario 64 DS proved the DS could do a lot of things. It could handle large games, it could have download play, and it has a touchscreen minigames. So in a way, it was kind of a tech demo. Overall, I'm gonna rate Super Mario 64 DS an 8.5 out of 10. It's still a great game, but I prefer the original over it because it's more precise and smooth to play, and that's the most important thing about a game. But man, if this were delayed for the Wii's launch and the characters were refined, this would have been easily better than the original. Now it's time for some fun facts about Super Mario 64 DS. Did you know the game was originally going to be titled Super Mario 64 x 4? It would have featured 4-player co-op, similar to Super Mario 3D Worlds. This was likely scrapped due to Super Mario 64 DS's battle mode and time constraints. Did you know that if you look in the manual, you can see a purple bunny? This may have been an indication that Waluigi was in development as a playable character. Probably not though.